Welcome to Third Floor Views, a production of Chesapeake Family Life, where we talk about health, education, and living with kids. I'm your host, Janet Jefferson. Today, we're talking about the new book, Everybody Talk. It's a book about bodies and boundaries to keep kids safe. Joining us is co-author Marissa Jackman, executive director of the Aaron Levitas Foundation, and they are located in Baltimore. We'll be talking about this great book that's for parents and thinking about why it's important for parents to have it in their home library, and also why these conversations are important to have with kids of all ages. So thank you so much, Marissa, for being here today.
Thank you, Janet, for having me.
To our viewers, if you have any comments or questions, please put those in the comment section and we will get to as many of those as we can. Marissa, let's get started. So first, let's just talk about the book. So what is the book? What topics are covered? And what is the general mission of Everybody Talk?
So the book, Everybody Talk, is really about boundaries, including body parts and conversations for kids to have with, trusted loved ones about things that are going to come up in life, right? To help keep them safe and our goal is sexual violence prevention, sexual assault prevention, including sexual abuse.
So this could be really a heavy topic for parents, and we're going to dive more into that. But this is a picture book, and it's gorgeous. It's a really fun picture book. So I wanted to talk a little bit about who the book is for. Is it for kids? Is it for parents? And in terms of kids, like what age range? What was sort of your vision or goal with the book, and who the audience is?
Right. So it started actually, I was having a conversation with another mom. She came to one of our events and we really were getting into the concept of boundaries, and the statistics are really rough out there, right? For the sexual violence and how it escalates as they get older and things happening to kids when they're younger. And it came upon like, is there a book about that? How do we talk about this? And certain statistics around protective factors, right? What can we do to prepare children so they can communicate with adults about certain things that might be happening? And so we're like, she's like, let's do this book. And so that's the co-author, Matthew Middleman and his wife, Lauren Shapiro, were instrumental in this, and the brainchild really of them. And I'm so thankful they came to us, and we brought in all these experts because this topic is a heavy topic, and there's so much involved with it. It's not just body parts. It's not just boundaries, right? It's not, there's not just one thing, and it feeds into a lot of different parts. So we cover that. We cover some of these uncomfortable conversations, but like you said, it's a picture book. We keep it really simple. It's the first step. There are so many more steps that we'll take in this lifelong conversation with youth and, your children, but this is possibly your first, conversation starter with them, and helping aid parents or caregivers to maybe, go on that journey and start the conversation with their kids.
Gotcha. So it's a primer.
Yes.
Both for parents and for kids. So would you recommend this is something that might be a baby shower gift, or like, okay, you're entering preschool or you're entering elementary school? Like, where would you actually sit down and read this with kids?
If you didn't have it once they're born, because it is a perfect baby shower gift, because what do all those baby books have? Head, shoulders, knees, and toes, right? We start that so early. And so we want to make sure that all the body parts are included, and you can mix it in there, right? You can say them and also then say elbow and nose. So they know it's just a body part. It's their body part. And then as they get older, we teach them, how to, keep it private and protect it with care, things like that. But what's so cool about the book is there's conversations throughout a kid's life, right? So you kind of start with the really early stuff, body parts when they're little, or some kids, I know some 7-year-olds who don't know all the names of their body parts. So if that isn't happening, that's then 7 it is. But as a parent, trying to be like, all right, let's make sure my child can communicate with me about their bodies. It works in doctor's offices, or if something's happening, it is important that they can communicate that. And as well as there's just a ton of other topics about, safe play when you go to someone's house. things that happen at school, not at school, with family. Because really, unfortunately, with, sexual violence, it's not off limits from happening from someone that you know. And unfortunately, statistics show that it is oftentimes, more than not, it is someone that you know, whether it's peer-to-peer sexual violence or it is sexual abuse.
Mm-hmm. That's really helpful to think of it as a topic that needs to be constantly revisited. And in terms of this book, having those layers built in. So, like, okay, great. We're dealing with, a 1-year-old who's just beginning to engage with language. So, like, body parts, perfect. But
Yeah.
then, oh, now we're headed to school and into like maybe a larger school setting. So maybe it's kindergarten. This book is still applicable and has those really useful messages. They'll be like, oh yeah, let's revisit this. This is really important. And then the idea of like, oh, now it's time for maybe a sleepover, and I'm going to my friend's house for the first time as a sleepover, which is a really, a rite of passage for many kids. So thinking about, okay, it's a new situation. Let's maybe revisit some of these concepts because you're going to be in situations that are new. So it sounds like it's
Exactly.
helpful for the book itself is helpful for a huge age range.
Definitely. I mean, the co-author had shared, an experience with his child, I think at 5, something that happened on the playground, that they didn't have the words to communicate, someone was, physically touching them in a way they didn't like, and they didn't know what to do. And he was like, oh my gracious, this is not okay. How could I have let this happen, kind of thing. So it really reinforces it. And whether they're playing safely with a friend, but you want them to have the language. And like you said, it is exciting that it's exciting and important to know that this conversation is a lifelong conversation. And this is, you can take this with you on your journey.
The other thing that I noticed flipping through some of the book is your nod to diversity and making sure you're talking about issues that are going to come at the intersection of different cultures interacting with each other. So, and then also the idea of ableism and kids interacting with kids that maybe are different from them in ways that they hadn't necessarily perceived before, and how to empower those kids who are feeling the different, but then also how to empower those kids who are encountering that difference, and how to make sure that they're being kind and respectful and sensitive. So with that concept, which I think is so useful and so relevant, I wanted just to talk a little bit about who wrote this book, because I know the list is impressive.
Yes.
Who was involved with writing this book, and sort of what angles did they bring to their contributions?
Right. So like the co-author, Matthew Middleman, really wrote the first version. And then we sat down, we looked at it, and we brought in a ton of experts. And the first people really around the table was LifeBridge Health Center for Hope, working on, sexual abuse prevention. And then we also had gender violence experts, like at the University of Maryland Law School. And we had teachers and librarians. We had Chimmy Boyd Keys, who is diversity and inclusion and a racial equity consultant as well. And then therapists to ensure, it's trauma informed. Mm-hmm. And because, like you said, all of these topics are whirling together, right? We know that certain bullying can lead to sexual violence. And so, like you said, differences are important, that kids can learn about them and understand and know how to be inclusive of seeing things that might be different from them, or, accepting each other for who they are, and not having hate rise on that. And so it was really important that they brought that in. Like, for example, our diversity consultant, honestly, when we started, we didn't have this character, Dino, and we said it's a must have. She felt that kids like him were really underrepresented. We found that a lot of books don't have children in it at all. It's like animals are like the number one children in children's books,
Right.
but that means there's a lot of kids not seeing themselves. And we were like, okay, I just don't feel like having an elephant doing this is going to really hit it home. I mean, these are conversations we had, right? And then we're like, we're going to take a risk here. We're going to have kids, and we, have kids that, hopefully children can see themselves. We also have on the end pages a lot of other diversity, because it was important that kids in the marginalized communities, so to speak, can really also see themselves. And we had another consultant, Emily Ladow, who she uses a wheelchair, and we had other individuals as well. Her name is Katz, but like, we wanted to make sure that people were represented, of all shapes and sizes, and like you said, ableism. So thank you. And we hope that it like I said, it's just such a platform for conversations, so that we know can support, these important skills and healthy attitudes and behaviors that can lead to, healthy relationships in their futures.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. How do you recommend parents use this? Or what, should they just read through it and be like, ta-da, now we're done? Or, is it a springboard for more conversation? Is there a curriculum or resources that you recommend? What should parents do with this book?
A great question. So I know that when I get a book, you just want to like rip it open and, be like, let's do this. And then I'm like, maybe I should have read that first, because I'm, trying to work on different things with your kids. So we do recommend, it is so exciting when it arrives, that you do take some time alone or with your partner or your family unit, not including the little ones, and just like become familiar, because you might go, oh my goodness, I know what my little one's going to say when that happens. Let me think of a response, right? You might have a kid that's just an absorber, or you might have one that's a talker, right? Like mine, getting through bedtime book reading is a joy and a journey. Okay. I mean, one page can take so long. So, it depends on you and your little ones for sure. And, just even if they don't know how to read yet, you can just look at the pictures, right? For round one with them. You might only get through a couple pages, because we did want to make sure we didn't want to have to send everybody 15 books, right? So it's all in one, but you might want to just start with a couple first pages. Maybe they know their body parts, maybe they don't. So it depends on where is that conversation going to start with you, and then you go on. And we do have, and all of our experts did help kind of with some of those questions that are asked throughout, right? Like if a child does end up telling you something that has happened that they didn't like, it's really important that those are moments that you listen and you encourage them for saying something, and not saying like, why did you do that? Or did that really happen? Right? Because this is the moment that you're teaching that skill, that your child can tell you anything, whether it's a good thing or a not so good thing, or something that they're just questioning. And so it's really going to be a fun thing, and something might happen, right? Let's say something happens on the playground, or they're using the word secret, and touching is never a secret. There's a page in here about that. Or they witnessed something, so they weren't actually the one that it happened to. There's an example of that in the book. So there's so much, but then you can also like use it as that guide too. So it is going to be an experience for you two to explore together, and hopefully something for the child, maybe they'll use it as a tool to speak to you. There is a spot here when you get to it where the child can write, that big lesson, someone that they can say something to if they feel unsure or scared. And we kind of put it in younger kids' terms too, like if they're flip-flops in their belly or they sweat in their hands. And don't be offended, parents, if they don't mention you, because if you're the one asking the question, they might think like, oh, let me say somebody else because you're asking it to me. That doesn't mean they don't trust you.
Right, right. That's really helpful to hear. I think it's also some of your other tips were amazing in terms of like maybe you should take a little bit of time to look over the book first, and then even talk to your other caregivers that are involved, your spouse or your partner, and make sure that you're on the same page. And then think about maybe how is my child going to react in some responses, so you can be ready and not in this sort of awkward tongue-tied moment where I think some parents do. They just need a little bit more time to think about it before,
Mhm.
that 4-year-old question just blurps out
Right,
and it's
right.
like, oh God, what are we talking about?
Yeah, right.
So that was really helpful. And then I think also the idea of noticing when your kid is doing the thing that you taught them to do and to celebrate that. Because I
Mhm.
think, especially with these challenging topics of sexual assault and just sort of body awareness and seeing different things and celebrating different things and protecting different things, when your child is doing what you want them to do, that you're not like, shh, shh, we're not talking about that, or but that you find a way to address it that's appropriate, and maybe say like, oh, maybe now's not the time or place, but I'm really excited that you're
Mhm.
seeing these things and you're noticing these things, and making
Definitely.
sure that you're doing positive reinforcement that you want to do, not that it's more of just a quick response that you can't help yourself. So that's a
Right,
really
right.
great reminder.
Yeah.
So I see this book as a great beginning for young children into elementary age. What do you recommend for parents who have older children that they're through with that phase? How do they continue this conversation, especially as you're reaching sexual maturity and sex is on the brain of teenagers and they're starting to think about these encounters and having these encounters? How are you preparing your child for that, that they're staying safe and they're not getting themselves into dangerous situations?
Yeah. And I'll say, depending on the child's age, right? Like what happens to them is not their fault. And that's
Right.
really important to remember. And so we at the Aaron Levitas Foundation definitely have kept that in mind. And so this book is kind of filling that like that early stage. But I will also say, like I said, if you have an 8, 9, 10, 11-year old that doesn't know they can come to you about anything, right? Or doesn't know their body parts. Let's keep that in mind. That's something that you can also make sure. But we are creating a parent education program. It's going to be virtual, online, free for all family units. Anyone will be able to access it. And it's going to take those conversations to the next level. And it's going to be, laced with information that links to sexual violence prevention. So safe use of social media and technology. And we recognize that a conversation with a 4-year-old about that is going to be different than a 16-year-old. And so we have that in mind and we know that, but there are ways that you want to breach these conversations. And we have some resources on our website about the book, Everybody Talk, book.org. And we are building that out. That's like in our plan, because just remember though, that this is a lifelong conversation. And so it is a journey. I know I keep using that word, but like this thing is a marathon, right? Like kids are growing up and at any age you want them to be able to come speak with you. But there are these skills and attitudes that we are trying to start early with so we can focus on prevention, because our work at the Aaron Levitas Foundation, we do focus on that middle school age, which we find is a really critical time for young people, because that's when, sexual harassment, which we know is a precursor to the later, more violent, sexual violence, it's at its highest in middle school. About 50% of middle school students are reporting experiencing sexual harassment. And so that is where we do focus. But it doesn't mean they can't learn something later, but it is important that we do all start early with the education.
That makes so much sense. With that idea of this is happening so much in middle school, what are some common attitudes and perceptions that do give rise to sexual harassment, and maybe as middle school and as an example? And then how do parents address that with their kids? Like, what are some common things that you're seeing, and what do you tell parents to do?
Right. So, and it all flip flops, right? So like an unhealthy attitude or behavior. So let's say, they don't have good communication. So you want good communication. So they know they can talk to you. They know they can tell somebody, verbalize it. Healthy boundaries or unhealthy boundaries. So if they don't know that they have body autonomy, that can be a risk factor. If they know that they have it, that's a protective factor. Understanding that other people have their own boundaries that are different from them. That's important. And healthy gender norms, things that they might see modeled in society, in their own home, being able to respect somebody and be inclusive of who they are, because we know things like homophobic bullying, calling people names based on their gender, that is a risk factor. So on the other side, understanding that and being inclusive can be, a healthy behavior and attitude to have on that as well. Reading facial expressions, there's a ton of things that align with these unhealthy attitudes and behaviors that we're looking at to try to educate on the other side of them. And it's not so complicated when you really think about it, right? Like you're like, oh, I can teach healthy boundaries. Wow, that's like not so bad. So that's why it's like such a great time to be starting this and modeling. All of it is so important. I have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old, and you really realize in your own, when you'll start really thinking about this, things are going to come up, right? And it's so simple, but like mommy's putting on makeup. He wants to put on makeup. What does that mean? Or wearing red, wearing pink, because they're trying to put things in boxes and helping them understand that it's, people can do what they want to do, express themselves how they want to express themselves, have long hair, have short hair. All of those things are really important. And if you can be aware of it and model, inclusion and support, there won't be, we're hoping to see those healthy attitudes and behaviors when they might come upon somebody who is different from them or doing something differently from the way they thought it was supposed to be because of whether it's your household or society.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We've already talked about so much. If you had to distill things down, whether it be from your middle school curriculum or the book with younger kids, or even working with older kids, what are some maybe critical things that you feel like every single parent must talk to or address or teach their kid?
So number one is that teaching them that they can talk to you about anything. Just, I'm here for you no matter what. I won't be mad. You can tell me, right? Because we had someone talk about invasion on internet, right? And something happened and their child knew I'm feeling uncomfortable here. I should talk to my parents about it, which is a hard skill, right? Like people are getting scammed every day on the internet. And this had to do, with the topic of sexual violence. So that is a huge skill, and it will be something they can really carry with them into so many places. So that's number one. We also want to make sure, that they do know their body parts. It's a helpful thing in that. And modeling, right? What they see in the home. And that's going to then cover all that stuff, boundaries, like you're tickling your little kid, or someone says, I really need my space as a 16-year-old closing the door, and making sure that you model it in your own life, not having to hug, smelly Aunt Sally, because that's confusing for the little kids. They're like, well, then somebody else wants to hug me, but they're someone I'm supposed to let hug me or do something. So it's really important that they can take those skills with them later. I know I'm like yelling out way too many, but the fact that they can talk to you about anything, body parts, boundaries, and building empathy, reminding them that, flipping the switch sometimes maybe and saying, well, how does that make you feel? Or, helping them see the other side of things. So then you have to think, when you're an adult, we want to see those skills for those healthy, relationships that they can have later in life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Sometimes these conversations can be really challenging for adults. What tips or tricks do you have to give parents to help them get over their own anxieties or hangups?
Yeah. I've had so many conversations and someone was like, oh, well, my kid's too young for that. They're 4. And I was like, oh, okay, that's fair. Let's talk about that. So it's really important, I think, to first, we know to think about all the things that have happened in your own life, with statistics and studies, it shows, 1 in 5 women have experienced attempted or completed rape in their lifetime. About 44% of women and had it before the age of 18, certain experiences. And, this happens to boys as well. And it's really important, individuals from all different communities, transgender, and we just want to be mindful of what's happened in your own life. And there is support on our website about that, because that's going to be, we've had adults read the book and share that they ended up sharing their own experiences with their families. So there's again, the word journey that a parent might have as an adult reading through this. And then that's one thing. And then saying, okay, I'm ready to take this on with my child. It's their own experience, right? And if they're little, they're going to ask pretty simple questions, and that's all it needs to be. But you're prepping them and giving them really important, skills and attitudes and behaviors that can be supportive of healthy relationships and those healthy life skills that can take them through life. And the big one, that they know they can count on you or someone they trust in their future. So I'd say to think about why you're uncomfortable with something. Why is that? Someone said, oh, I don't think I'm allowed to teach my kid their body parts yet. And they went all the way up to 10, this person's children. And I said, well, I think you should talk to that person about it. I think it was someone in their life. And that's for them to unwrap. Why aren't they going to learn those? And what would it do if they did learn them? And then he actually came back to me and was like, get me one of those books right now. And he's got like a ton of kids. So I was like, yes. But it's a journey for parents and things that we see in our own lives that we maybe want to change for our kids' future. Right. And that's hard. That's different. And we're admitting to knowing that we want to do something differently for them so we can prepare them for all types of life situations.
I think it's always a good thing for parents to reflect upon their own experience and think, what are my hangups and why am I choosing to teach my child the way that I am? And why am I addressing things the way that I am? And is it working? Is it a good idea? Or maybe I need to do some work myself and change this behavior. So with that, do you have some recommended resources, whether that's through the Aaron Levitas Foundation or another organization? What are some maybe resources that you would recommend for parents?
I'd say go on our website. We have a ton of resources. So whether something has happened in your life, we do know that individuals that experience, whether there's domestic violence and other things, the risk for children, unfortunately, to experience or be involved in sexual violence in their future, it's higher. So it's really important that you get the help that you need. And if anything has happened to the children, that they get the help that they need. And there are so many wonderful resources out there working on that. And so if you go to everybodytalkbook.org, we have a resources page that we're just starting. And you can also email us. And if you're looking for something that's not on there, we're here to help. So we will make sure that we can link you to something that can be helpful, because it is important, like you said, that everybody gets the support that they need. And there are some links on there to other future conversations to have. And once the parent education program is out, we're going to notify everybody who's gotten the book that they can now access this new resource and guide that'll probably come out next year.
That's great.
Yeah.
With that, so talking just a little bit more about the Aaron Levitas Foundation, could you just talk about some of the other things that you do? Because it seems like there's so much. So as we're diving into this topic, maybe some other things that the foundation does that might be of interest to our viewers and listeners today.
Definitely. So we have an in-school curriculum that talks about, we go in the school, there's 7 modules we teach, and it's things that are linked to research showing that help protect, children and young people against sexual violence, as well as helping them build those healthy attitudes and behaviors, healthy boundaries, healthy communication skills that they can take with them later, building empathy. So we have that program, and we're looking to scale it so we can get to more schools. And then we are also working on an a teacher training program that will even work for, any youth serving adult. So they will be able to identify and respond to things like sexual harassment that we talked about. So what happens is there's those the early sexual harassment signs, right? All these things that happen, and then sexual assault happens, but it's happening less. So let's focus on that thing that's happening a lot that we can help focus on, and then hopefully it can stop that later more violent acts that are occurring. And so that will help teachers, educators be aware and handle those sometimes really uncomfortable, hard situations, but handle them with prevention and not shaming, not blaming, and making sure that we take a situation and we learn from it, and it kind of prepares the educators to have the support that they need in certain situations, and to identify that it's actually happening. And then that parent education program that I talked about. So that'll be online and free. And it's, the book is this early conversation. And then this other parent education program that will be online will be, like I said, available to all, but it'll handle some of the older conversations that you have, kids playing Xbox and on YouTube, and, there's teen dating, and the conversation does start when they're little, but it also continues when they're older, and like you said, in different situations, going to people's houses and having relationships. And so it's really important that we give you the information so you can continue to grow with them, because it's like, oh, that makes sense once you learn about it, but it's not totally innate. So it's not so complicated. When you get it, you're like, oh yeah. Right? Like safe use of social media and technology. I had a parent go, well, don't worry, my kids are not allowed near anything that's internet, so they're covered. And it's like, well, kids are like water. They're going to find a way. So let's make sure that if and when they're in a situation, they actually know what to do, not it's just never going to be there. And so it's important that you prepare them and have those conversations, that they feel supported.
Definitely, because it's a big world out there. And so
yes,
we have parents have a lot of work to do, but it is important to think about, someday my child won't be under the roof of my house, hopefully. And,
yes.
and we want them to go out and be on their own and experience things. And so we need to make sure that we're providing the right tools for them to be successful.
Yeah. And that decision making, right? On whichever side that they might be on. Are they witnessing something? Are they, able to make a decision that can help somebody, or are they, on the other end? So it's really important that we talk about it and we give them those, the best and most healthy skills we can give them.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Marissa Jackman, who is Executive Director of the Aaron Levitas Foundation and co-author of Everybody Talk. Thank you also to all of our viewers and listeners. Make sure that you do visit ChesapeakeFamily.com for up-to-date local information on home, health, and living for today's Maryland parent. This episode will be archived on ChesapeakeFamily.com in both video and podcast formats. There will also be links to the Aaron Levitas Foundation, so you can find the book, you can look at the resources and get started on this journey. I'm Janet Jefferson with Chesapeake Family Life and Third Floor Views. Thanks so much.